We don't have to waste time. We will start. We have distinguished speakers. I have arranged it in such a way that each speaker will be looking at a particular aspect of the socio-economic and political development of Africa generally. Then, after the four speakers, after they might have given us food for thought, then we will now call on the big man to say, look, for us to be able to achieve all what people are saying, then we must operate in an environment that is free from corruption. Not totally free of corruption, don't get me wrong, because anybody saying that, even where we are, if any country in the world, the US is corrupt also. But what we are saying is to be able to control corruption so as to attract investment to the country. What we are saying is we want our country to develop. Let the bygone be bygone, and everybody must contribute in the little way they can. So the first presentation will be given by the gentleman from the law department. So before I go on, sorry, let me formally acknowledge the participation, because I did not do this alone. I did it in collaboration with Tunde Alabi and the African advisor, okay, and the Bell Television, okay. So he has played very, very, very giant role. In fact, if you would say anything, he has played 75% of it. So please give him for the past 2 weeks, today, my apology. Anyway, I wanted to do that as time goes on. For the past 2 weeks, today and myself, we have been on telephone tour. We don't sleep. As I call him, he will wake up and say, "Doctor, what do you want me to do?" I say, "Do this, do that," and that is out. So he did almost 75% of it. Please clap for him again. So we will now start with someone from the law department of the Queen University. See, I have been able to select the speakers to be able to make it a sort of round people in a round hole, not in a small hole. So you'll be hearing from each of them, and from there, we will now come and call on our big man to say, what do you see to this? Please give us the solution. Yes, the first person is John Taylor to come and
Well, Dr. Bakre, thank you very much, and it's a real pleasure to have the opportunity to be with you today. And so please give me a 5-minute warning when you want me to stop, because one has the challenge to keep within a certain period of time. So without further ado, I'll begin. As Dr. Bakre said, I'm from the Centre for Commercial Law Studies of Queen Mary University, which is the postgraduate arm of Queen Mary. In fact, I believe it's the largest postgraduate law school in Europe. This year we have more than 1,100 students studying either to be Masters of Law or PhDs in law. And we concentrate on commercial law subjects. But my background is really to speak to you about encouraging new business development and investment opportunities. The focus is in sub-Saharan Africa. And I should say immediately, Dr. Bakre selected someone who knows something about business development something about investment opportunities, but very little about sub-Saharan Africa. That is your expertise. I can see that is really your expertise. And the reason, I came originally from Australia. I spent the early years of my life as a lawyer in Australia, and then I joined the Asian Development Bank in Manila in the Philippines, which, as you know, does work similar to the African Development Bank does in Africa. The Asian Development Bank does it in Asia. This was back in the 1970s. And I travelled extensively and worked on many of the projects which the ADB, Asian Development Bank, was then financing throughout Asia for the development of that region, which, as you know, has seen phenomenal, unbelievable growth. No one could imagine in 1973 where Asia would have gone in 2018. And I believe that we are standing now at a stage in history that if Africa does it right, no one will believe in 50 years the development that has come to Africa. Now I actually, from my travels in Africa, I've done some travels in Africa, West Africa, East Africa, South Africa. I believe that Africa is in the position of takeoff that Asia was in the 1970s. If we can get the investment and other environment really humming in the way that they got it humming in Asia. There are, of course, many, many elements to getting the investment environment correct, something that would spur investment. You all know this, and I don't wish to go over stuff that you know. There are so many elements to it, we could be 3 or 4 days just discussing each of the elements, the economic, the business opportunity, the financial, the fiscal, legal, even legal, political, cultural, the trust element. All of these are needed to be, as it were, aligned to get investment opportunities raised in the African context. Other speakers will address those questions. I would like to focus, though, on one element of anti-corruption, because our guest speaker, the big man, is going to be talking on especially the issues of corruption. And if you permit me, I'd just like to focus on one particular area and share with you some really interesting developments that have undergone in the international financial institutions, and in particular in the International Monetary Fund. Now, as you know, the IMF is really central to the development of worldwide, effectively. It's not a development institution. It's a balance of payments, effectively, institution. But it's critical to the overall financial stability and economic environment of all our countries, whether from Africa or from anywhere in the world. And the IMF has identified, of course, that corruption is an urgent global problem. It's obviously not an African problem alone. I mean, I just cut out of the Times yesterday, just as late as yesterday, I cut a little piece out of the Times. It's unfair to perhaps cite one particular example, but let me give you it. The Abu Dhabi Fund, a fund in Abu Dhabi, is suing the great and good Goldman Sachs over scandal, is the heading. Where's the scandal? The scandal is in Malaysia. The scandal involves one of the Malaysian sovereign wealth funds, allegedly. And it's not a small amount of scandal, if it is correct. The allegations involve $4.5 billion of embezzlement alleged to have occurred from that sovereign wealth fund on behalf of various parties. I'm not going to go and bore you with the whole case, but I just wanted to give an example in Asia, not in Africa, and one could point to examples around the world. It's a big problem. So the IMF said it's not only that, and it's big, and it's a problem because what is it doing? Well, it's raising inequalities, it's undermining the government's ability to deliver important economic public goods. It creates an environment, therefore, that impedes private investment. It doesn't encourage private investment, it tends to stop it. Because if the environment is corrupt, as a private investor, I'm really uncertain that I really want to be involved in that. Thank you very much. It reduces trust, and it's shown to lower, according to the IMF, lower the GDP of the countries where it's occurring. It certainly lowers foreign direct investment flows. It attacks the tax system, and as I said, increases inequalities. So the IMF had said, well, 20 years ago they put in place certain policies to address corruption. In other words, to say the countries that they're financing, effectively the countries they're financing, they're saying, as the development bank institutions have done, well, we really don't want to be involved in corrupt activity. And so we'll put in place policies that try to address that. But by this year, beginning of this year, the IMF Board of Directors realised more has to be done by the IMF to try and address this issue. And they also recognised that this was because attitudes across the world towards the conduct of ethical business, attitudes have changed dramatically. Let me give you just one example. It used to be the case in several countries in the West, including the United Kingdom, including Germany, including other major countries, the United States, that a company could deduct as a business expense bribes given to get the business. So you'd pay a bribe somewhere out in Australia to get some business, and you could put that on your tax return as a business expense, as if you were just staying in a hotel there, you know, on the business, or the plane flight, or the plane flight. I mean, today, I can tell you, that is not the case in the United Kingdom, it's not the case in Germany. And the reason that these changes have occurred is a change in attitude or approach. That there is a way of conducting business that is ethical, and that bribery doesn't really form part of that ethical environment. Fine. So what did they do? Well, the IMF board in April of this year, so we're talking very recent developments, and forgive me if you already know these developments, but very briefly, they decided on a framework for enhanced fund engagement with the countries that they support, and it consists of, first of all, assessing if governance vulnerabilities are severe enough to have a macroeconomic effect on the country. In other words, is the governance of the country severely impacting on the economy? If it is, and included in that governance assessment is such things as the tax regime, the oversight of the financial environment, the oversight of the central bank operations of the country, market regulations, including the rule of law and addressing anti-money laundering and other activities. So they assess these things. They then decide is that macroeconomic impact such that reforms are needed, and if so, what sort of reforms? So they will then be indicating to the country, if that is the case, certain reforms should be undertaken. They would then shape their policy recommendations accordingly to that country, and they'll draw in other international organisations, the views of the other international organisations, the World Bank. If it's Africa, it would be the African Development Bank, the OECD, other international organisations that might have something useful to say on the subject. And then, in addition, finally, they're going to assess the government measures to prevent private actors from offering bribes or concealing corrupt acts, including what are the criminal laws of the country concerned, or what is being done to prevent anti-money laundering, for example. And when the IMF makes loans to the countries, so many countries in Africa, when it provides financial support, then one can expect to see in the conditions applicable to that loan elements to address these issues that I've mentioned. The hope is that it might raise the awareness and change the attitudes. But that's not all this new policy does, because you'll say to me, oh, John, that's not really very fair. I mean, this is really something directed then against the poorer countries of the world that would need IMF support. What about the rich ones, where effectively the supply of the bribes is coming from? Well, the IMF board invited all countries to take part in this sort of assessment. And interestingly enough, each of the G7 countries, plus Austria and the Czech Republic, have volunteered to be subjected to the same analysis, to the same assessment. And in fact, the first country report that addresses these issues, just this year it's happened because the policy was in April, is the United States. And let me read just one sentence from that report relevant to our topic today. The report, it's a report of the executive directors of the International Monetary Fund addressed to the United Kingdom. And the sentence reads, directors, that is to say the IMF directors, welcome ongoing efforts to enhance corporate transparency and, this is diplomatic language for do something more, and look forward to sustained progress in strengthening the effectiveness of enforcement of measures against foreign bribery. Close quotes. Interesting, yes? That here's this major international organisation of which all our countries, no matter where you're from, your country is a member of the IMF, it's represented on the board of directors of the IMF. It's telling Britain, in diplomatic terms, let's see some further tightening up of your enforcement of measures against foreign bribery. So the final point that I'd like to say is that this new policy is, I'm told by one of the most senior colleagues at the IMF who's responsible for this particular area, that particular policy implementation, a Deputy General Counsel of the IMF, he said to me, John, this policy has strengthened in a very practical way our collaboration with other international organisations. I mentioned earlier, the IMF said in the policy they'll work with the World Bank or the OECD. Well, apparently they're doing that. So there's going to be a collective effort among the international organisations aimed at trying to get hold of this problem. We all know, as Dr. Bakre said, we're not going to be able to eradicate it entirely, but I think we can do a lot in the right direction. So my concluding remarks are the overall intention of what the IMF has done, and it's something which could be taken to any of your countries for local, domestic entrenchment of the change of attitude needed, is increased transparency of transactions and of activities. Secondly, application of a rule of law, whatever that might be, but lawyers can sit down and thrash that out. A program of genuine economic reform that's going to encourage investment. And finally, good governance and leadership. Because without that, without the personal, human, good governance and leadership, all of this is nice work. So that's what I prepared, and please, I'm happy to take any questions or
Well, I think we are getting there. The moment now is for our guest, our August visitor. To start with, I am not going to alone be introducing this man because we have been pursuing for long. I mean, you know what I'm talking. It's not someone you can just say come and he will come. So, I mean, he has a lot of responsibility going up and down. So, I'm going to be calling on the advisor, the African advisor to the center, to make a brief introduction. I mean, I'm not just going to tell him to say, go and talk to us. He's going to be talking to us because he's going to be rounding up the whole thing before we come to the question time. I have no doubt that many people are here to hear from the horse's mouth, and I'm sure he's here to be able to tell us what are the problems. How far have we been, especially with the new government that is actually trying everything to fight corruption? How far have we gone? What are the problems? And what are the sort of something? Can we get a green light at the end of the tunnel? So all this will be going on. So I'll be calling on the advisor to the center, Tunde Alabi, to formally introduce to welcome and introduce our guests.
To inform you that seated in this room are carefully selected leaders in the community. We have leaders. We have EMC Jenkins, who represents the Home Office here and other organizations. We have the Metropolitan Police National Officers represented here. We have mayors represented here. We have leaders in Nigerian community and Friends of Nigeria all represented in this meeting. Major Chairman, sir.
Thank you very much. It's real. If you're a Nigerian or a non-Nigerian, you want to see some of it, we'll take you around in Lagos, in Abuja, and after this meeting, maybe you also help us do some whistleblowing. Because so I will save us the time. There is a lot of literature here. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted to be here, of course. I'm always happy to meet Nigerians in diaspora and friends of Nigeria, so that you can also join us in the fight against corruption. I'm very delighted to be here with all of you in my capacity as the chairman of the Association of Head of Anti-Corruption Agency in Commonwealth, Africa, and the acting chairman of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission in Nigeria. I consider it an honor to be invited to deliver this lecture for two reasons. The first reason is that Queen Mary University established in the year 1785 AD, that is about 233 years ago, is a well-established and cosmopolitan university with good academic standing in the United Kingdom, among countries of Commonwealth and beyond. This is testified to by the consistent high rankings it received from the US News and the War Report and Times Higher Education and other bodies. This is further underscored by the 8 Nobel laureate produced by this great university. The second reason is that although this Center for African Research is young, it has great potentials and a future that is full of promise. I am particularly pleased to note that the main objective of the center, to quote the director, Dr. Awolabi Bakari, who is here with us, explore ways the full potential of Africa and its peoples can be utilized for the growth and development of Africa through African-led research programs that will bring the best of the continent, its leaders and researchers into one room for solution to many problems that have befallen this important continent, unquote. This research objective has clearly placed Queen Mary University alongside schools of Oriental and African Studies and Chatham House as the leading citadel of learning and research on African issues and development. This is a noble undertaking with which I want to be associated, and a major factor for my acceptance of the invitation to deliver this lecture. Therefore, I want to thank the director, the entire staff in the center, and the university at large for this invitation. Your action in inviting me is a proof of your readiness to match word with action to initiate and coordinate conversation and action that seek to resolve the many problems that have befallen Africa. My discussion today will focus on the following: the definition and meaning and perception of corruption from a historical perspective. This is intended to provide an understanding of corruption as it's called, the negative impact of corruption on the African continent, telling corruption and the way forward. Corruption in Nigeria and the work of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, and finally the way forward in the fight to eradicate corruption not only in Nigeria but also in Africa. I think I will save your time. I won't bother you with the definitions and the concept. You can look at the literature review data. That's right. The negative impact of corruption on Africa. This presentation supports the view that corruption is one of the factors that contributed to the current predicament of the African continent. The World Bank estimates that about $1 trillion are given out as bribes worldwide, representing about 3% of the world GDP. There is another dimension of corruption in Africa that is worth mentioning because its greater destructive potential. Because of its greater destructive potential, this pertains to large-scale corruption perpetrated by a ruling elite, top government bureaucrats, politicians, businessmen, bank executives, captains of industries in the private sector, and the rest. For example, between 1970 and 1996, capital flight from sub-Saharan Africa through corruption totaled $187 billion, an amount that exceeded the external debt of the countries involved. The report of the high-level panel on illicit financial flows from Africa, which was launched and endorsed by the AU in February 2015, revealed that currently Africa is estimated to be losing more than $50 billion annually through illicit financial flows. I think this is an old one because Mr. Thabo Mbeki visited Nigeria and he gave us another figure much higher than that. This outflow were derived principally from commercial transactions, tax evasion, money laundering, drugs, arms and human trafficking, bribery, corruption, and abuse of office. The panel added that Nigeria ranked first among 10 African countries by cumulative illicit financial flows from 1970 to 2008, with a total illicit financial flow of $217 billion, constituting 30.5% of Africa's total share of illicit flows. This unprecedented financial privilege, indulged by African ruling elite and their domestic and foreign collaborators, have produced two immediate consequences. First, the huge amounts stolen by them and taken out of the continent and hidden in safe havens in Europe, North America, Asia, and other places have virtually crippled socio-economic development in Africa. Secondly, the corrupt act of these unpatriotic African looters have grounded many private and public enterprises, pushing some countries to the verge of financial ruin. Throughout African continent, corruption has caused severe wastage and misallocation of resources, delayed growth and socio-economic development through means investment opportunities, lower growth and widened inequalities. Likewise, corruption continues to decrease government revenues, undermine private sector development, and increase inefficiency in public sector. In addition, corruption discourages foreign direct investment by creating economic uncertainties, increasing operating costs, and distorting incentive for investment. According to corruption is the single greatest obstacle of economic and social development. It's a disaster. Beyond doubt, the negative social, economic, and political consequences of corruption on Africa are crippling and unbearable. If this trend is not arrested and reversed as a matter of urgency, our survival as a country, as a continent, is in a serious jeopardy. Now, taming corruption and the way forward in Africa. Taming corruption is therefore the only way forward for Africa in its quest for economic development, political instability, and social progress. Fortunately, the task of taming corruption in the continent is being undertaken by anti-corruption agencies within individual African nations and through collaboration with a number of international agencies. There are a number of international conventions and legal instruments that are facilitating the fight against corruption in Africa. However, in my opinion, the most far-reaching anti-corruption investment instrument of global significance is the United Nations Convention Against Corruption. This convention contains both mandatory and non-mandatory provisions as one of the several legally binding international anti-corruption agreements that significantly facilitate the fight against corruption in Africa. Nevertheless, the African continent has its own African Union Convention on Preventing and Combating Corruption, adopted by Head of State and Government of the African Union on the 11th of July 2003, and ratified by 38 African countries by 2018. This convention contains 22 articles with several separate provisions that clearly stipulate the ways and means of effectively preventing, investigating, and prosecuting corruption in Africa. The provisions relate to laundering the proceeds of corruption, fight against corruption and related offenses in public service, illicit enrichment, access to information, funding of political parties, jurisdiction, minimum guarantee of a fair trial, extradition, confiscation, and seizure of proceeds, and instrumentalities of corruption, bank secrecy, cooperation and mutual legal assistance, and international cooperation. It is important to say that the African Union Convention on Preventing and Combating Corruption primarily consists of mandatory provisions constituting a landmark development in the fight. This convention is a manifestation of a continental consensus on what African states should do in the areas of prevention. In the areas of prevention, criminalization, international cooperation, and asset recovery. Furthermore, the African Union member countries have taken additional practical steps to facilitate the fight against corruption. One of such was the designation of the 2008 as the African Anti-Corruption Year, which was commemorated in most African countries with lectures, rallies, media events, and other public relation activities. The experience of Nigeria in fighting corruption. Okay, I will just remind you, I think it's what we have seen. Just a refresher, just refresh your memory. Nigeria is one of the countries in Africa with high level of corruption. However, Nigeria also has a robust anti-corruption legal regime and agencies determined to fight and defeat corruption, to kill corruption. Therefore, rendering a brief account of the Nigerian experience in the fight against corruption is relevant to the topic of this lecture. One of the campaign promises of this government was to clamp down on corruption by presenting and implementing a national anti-corruption strategy. This promise was fulfilled on the 5th July 2017. The National Anti-Corruption Strategy is a blueprint for a realistic, comprehensive, and integrated plan for reducing corruption in Nigeria in line with Article 5 of the United Nations Convention Against Corruption. Article 5A imposes requirements on state parties to develop and implement or maintain effective coordinated anti-corruption policies. One purpose of National Anti-Corruption Strategy is to help generate and maintain the necessary leadership and broad support required to effectively curb corruption in Nigeria. It is also to produce coherence and synergy in a holistic effort to rid Nigeria of the menace of corruption, as it provides, and I quote, a platform to all sectors and stakeholders in the fight to combat corruption. I quote. The National Anti-Corruption Strategy is designed to intervene at the legal, policy, technical, and institutional level and promote a multi-pronged approach that strengthens the capacity of a dedicated anti-corruption and public accountability institution initiatives that promote and increase alignment of private and public interests, as well as engage more actively with the public. The NSCS adopt an approach covering the 5 thematic areas of prevention of corruption, as public enlightenment, campaign for ethical representation in the public and private sectors, enforcement and sanction, and recovery and management of pursuit of corruption. Once again, I can boldly point to the effect of sound anti-corruption policy on the economy, social and political well-being of nations by looking again at the examples coming out of Nigeria as follows. The government of President Muhammadu Buhari has made giant strides that saw introduction of integrated payroll and personal information system, (IPIS), which implementation has led to an extraordinary reduction of ghost workers, saving the treasury billions of naira every month. The whistleblower mechanism put in place by the administration has yielded enormous monetary recovery to the treasury and reduced corruption. At the commencement of the government of President Muhammadu Buhari, only 2 billion was in the federal government recovery account, and most of them came from well subsidy account. But as at today, this account has succeeded in netting over 400 billion naira, translating to 1,360% increase. Policies of government of Muhammadu Buhari that have reduced corruption and corrupt practices. Treasury single account, TSA, the bank verification number. The administration has equally signed a number of highly rewarding mutual legal assistance treaties with a number of countries that have translated into tremendous recoveries of proceeds of corruption. Improved investment climate in Nigeria. Yes, the anti-corruption strategy is structured and designed deliberately to create a very conducive investment climate, to encourage people both outside the country and inside the country to invest. So there are a lot of Nigerians who will come and suffer in the diaspora, and they will contribute money, and they will give it to one of their friends. They will go and buy properties for them. I took it very seriously. There was some Nigerians who contributed money, and I made sure the money is funded. So if you want to invest here, you want to come home, invest. If you have any problem, let me do a background check for you, so that you only deal with people who are credible. There is security of investment in the country, as Nigerians has recognized the right of the investor, both local and foreign, as enshrined in our constitution, which states clearly that no investment can be taken from its owners without recourse to the law. Outside of the constitution, there exist several laws that protect investment in Nigeria. The constitution also recognizes the result of arbitration processes and others arising therefrom. Judiciary in the country has a practice court to give legitimacy to award an arbitration clauses in agreement. In her belief in the sanctity of the judiciary, the government of Nigeria believes in the rule of law and the independence of the judiciary. Improved ease of business in Nigeria. We want you to come home. Following the introduction of policies by government to increase the ease of doing business in Nigeria, the nation has gained 24 points of excellence in the Global Ease of Doing Business Index. The improved ease of doing business in Nigeria currently experienced in Nigeria is the result of plugging avenues of petty and bureaucratic corruption. This in turn has improved investment appetite of investors in the country, who are assured that not only are their investments safe, but in the event of dispute, they will get their award. The effort of the Economic and Financial Crime Commission in fighting corruption. Do I read that? Or we discuss that? Discuss. Because you have seen the figures in the conviction, etc., recovery. All went. This is conviction. I think you saw it in the, it's covered in the documentary. I was never a teacher, you know. So, there's one here, strengthening the war against corruption. This survey, according to President Muhammad Buhari in a keynote address to the International Crime Court during its 20th anniversary celebration at The Hague in Netherlands, the obvious step we need to take to strengthen the war against corruption is the undertaking of periodic review of our strategy and method. She went further to suggest that, and I quote, a strong and effective ICC can also act as a catalyst for other justice administration efforts, expanding the reach of accountability. This could include serious cases of corruption by state actors that severely compromise the development effort of countries and throws them into greater poverty. This could also include cases of illicit financial flows where countries are complicit and obstruct repatriation of stolen assets. As the African Union champion on anti-corruption, these are issues dear to my heart. Unquote. In line with this, it is my firm belief that a clear strategy is essential in the following areas. First and foremost, the capacity of corruption fighting agency needs to be strengthened through adequate funding and other forms of support as a matter of urgency. Similarly, the effective enforcement of asset declaration of public office holders need to be reinforced. Both public and private office holders do have a forum for declaration of assets. Need to be reinforced in order to institute probity and accountability in public service. This should be accompanied by a concerted effort aimed at strengthening existing gaps and effective enforcement and effectively enforcing internal anti-corruption control within African states. Similarly, it is necessary for all African leaders to adopt a policy of naming and shaming all those who engage in corrupt practices, while encouraging and honoring those who do not. In this regard, whistleblowers should be celebrated, honored, and encouraged to become full-time corruption hunters. The corruption fighting strategy we should formulate for Africa should be one that is predicated on mass education and mobilization at grassroots level. The masses should be actively involved by taking ownership on the fight against corruption. That's why I'm here. I want you to take ownership of the fight against corruption. You have also a mandate to fight corruption. You don't have to do it the way I'm doing, but I'm telling you, you have a role to play. One of the best ways of realizing such a goal on a permanent basis is by incorporating anti-corruption lessons in our schools curriculum from the elementary levels upward. We should make it clear to our children from a very young age that corruption is not only bad, but detrimental to the process of human societies. We must expose all corrupt individuals and ensure that the younger generation does not grow up thinking of taking of looting government treasury as a career path. Finally, we must figure out a way of communicating the anti-corruption message to the public through different avenues such as song, music, drama, and poetry, to mention a few. All these are vital to galvanize mass participation in the fight against corruption. Prospect of future economic development. There is no doubt that we undertake the necessary measures for strengthening and enhancing the fight against corruption. We will begin to see positive indication of African economic development void of corruption in a relatively short period of time. This can be achieved using existing legal and other framework already in existence in Africa. By fighting corruption effectively, we will have succeeded in contributing to the realization of the economic goals of the African Union, which include the creation of a free market, a custom union, a single market, a central bank, and a common currency. These noble goals are realizable if we agree to commit ourselves to the war against corruption in a sincere and determined manner. Ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, in spite of the depth and gravity of corruption in Africa, we can confront and defeat and kill corruption through collective action. As a man-made problem, corruption can be solved with man-made solution. Fortunately, we can learn from the successful fight against corruption by Hong Kong, Singapore. Hong Kong was near in endemic corruption in the 1960s and 70s, but has now transformed itself into one of the least corrupt countries in the world. Singapore recorded a remarkable success in the fight against corruption because of the political will demonstrated by the country's leadership. A robust corrupt practices investigation bureau and a workable anti-corruption strategy that focused on effective laws, strong enforcement, and independent judiciary. In spite of numerous challenges, similar success stories are beginning to emerge on the African continent. Significant progress in combating corruption have been recorded in several countries in Africa. These emerging successes stories should inspire us to rise up and fight corruption with increased vigor and determination. In doing so, we look forward to support and cooperation of all Africans and friends of Africa. We need a global alliance and strategic partnership to successfully defeat this transnational crime. It's a disaster, it's a monster. I urge all of you sitting here to be part of this alliance and partnership in the interest of Africa and the rest of humanity. Finally, I wish to conclude this presentation by assuring you, in my capacity as the chairman of the head of Anti-Corruption in Commonwealth Africa and the Economic and Financial Crime Commission in Nigeria, that we will not relent. We will not let the people of Africa down in the discharge of our responsibilities. We will fight corruption with all necessary vigor and determination. We will not rest or waver until this crime is eliminated. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, what next should I say? You can see that this lecture, we actually selected the right topic, yes, and justice has been done to it, except there is argument from any angle. Then what I'm hearing is that because what we are trying to do is to go and take a tea Because from what I have seen here, and I heard from this man, I think people would like to take tea before we come back. It is not. See, I've been conducting research into corruption for the past 30 years. In the US, in Jamaica, I taught in Jamaica for 20 years. You follow? I have never, when I heard this man, right from the beginning, I said, I must bring this man. I like people who are very, very pragmatic. You say the truth and die there. Nobody can kill you right here. You know what I'm saying? What the good work you are doing, you must continue. Nobody can kill you. Now, what do you choose? You want to confront him now, or we should take him? Yeah. Okay, that's right. I think you will not be tired, I'm sure. No. Let me put you here, you see that. Yeah, I've got your I have your moderation because I know everybody has got one question or the other. So ask. Please let us do it orderly. Okay? And not question upon question. Just ask very genuine questions and let us answer it. Okay? Huh? Okay, that's right. Okay, that's right. You are ready? Good. Okay, then ask.
Actually, I don't.
That's right. I said it earlier. Please ask very concise, short, direct questions.
Okay. Actually, what I have actually is a small comment, and I hope that I will get on the answer from Mr. Magu. I'm happy that he's here today, and my question, my comment, and maybe a question is that I represent a company that actually is that's got a new tech that will help the FCC. Now, when you actually have cases, how do you actually make sure that those cases are go through the court process and be dealt with effectively? So I have a new system called the VAS system.
They are actually asking questions now.
It's a new way of how people can be verified and screened. It could be maybe before a court case, it could be maybe for assets declaration, or it could be maybe for all the short cases that's pending that EFCC can actually use. Now, from experience, I know that whenever you see the Nigerian officials here and you give them the documents, no disrespect to you, I know you're very, very busy. I don't want to read, I want to read it, and probably you could have time for me today or tomorrow, so I can go through some more detailed information on what I'm.
We'll discuss.
Okay, what I want to present to you.
The previous speaker.
Okay.
We'll sit down and.
About that, yeah.
Yes.
Because for me, I believe that we can all talk about complain and talk about Nigeria, but the solution is answer.
I mean, you came to it towards the end where you said corruption hunter. Now, two things came to me from what you showed there. Now, the notes, Tony, they were fresh from the printers. How can a single person carry those sort of money without having some people? A click. And towards the end, you came to it that there have been corruption hunters. You need to concentrate because people people, they have people, hundreds of people, who help them carry this money all over the place. That's number one. And how can that person in Nigeria get away with that sort of money when people are around that area? So, I mean, something is wrong somewhere. I'm sorry, I'm very busy, I cannot stay too long. We have a charity called in this country, Prince of Africa Consortium, and also in Nigeria, Trust Nation Builders. I am the president and the visionary. I'm going to go, I've written that details there. If you get back to me, I would like to get in touch.
Yes, I will, because we need to,
Bless you.
we need to collaborate.
That's fine. On this road, yeah.
I have just questioned because you haven't got the time.
Yeah,
The tea is getting cold downstairs. The tea is getting cold, so we need to move.
Short question. As you go many, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wish you Allah's protection as you posted, and I wish you happy anniversary for your in office. My question is this: what's your opinion of jail time as a deterrent strategy, which appears not working as before, because this was an assertion of Mr. President last month in Paris? That's one. What are the biggest challenges of fighting corruption in Nigeria? Is it legal framework, or is it the influence of the Western nations where the money is stuck in Swiss banks, or is it the legislative arm blockage that we saw in the media before you are confirmed as an acting chairman, or they are inability to confirm you as acting chairman of the EFCC? But we ask God, that's everything, to confirm you and protect you. So that's my question. Thank you so much.
Sorry, we will just ask the question and the chairman will now give a block answer. Okay. Yeah. Yes, sir. Oh, sorry.
Yes. We actually, there is a lot of emphasis. One very good strategy in fighting corruption is you need to take away the profit from the corrupt. Because if you don't take away the profit, you jail him. I mean, he will go back and use it to fight the government. So there is a lot of emphasis on really tracing and recovering proceeds of corruption. That's why we show you a lot of the houses. And one of our frustration is that in our collaborating with our friends outside the country, like here in London, you agree with me that the issue of designing has stayed for so long. Why should one matter be investigated for more than 3.5 years? In this era of artificial intelligence, or is it digital banking and cryptocurrency? It doesn't really make sense. So these are the areas that you help us. You have to constitute yourself into corruption hunters and follow all these things and put pressure that if they cannot, they should repatriate them back so that they can be prosecuted in Nigeria.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, you said the biggest challenges.
Of course.
Corruption fighting. Yes. You have a proper grip of the situation. Yes, we have problems in the judiciary, but I think there is less problem in judiciary now. We have recorded about 217 convictions this year alone. So because of the enactment of the AJA, Administration of Criminal Justice Act, is facilitated and it's going on fine. But the greatest challenge is corruption fighting back. They are chasing you everywhere. So that's
Thank you very much for coming, and bless you.
Thank you,
The question is, one, I want to know how I can reach you regarding buying properties in Nigeria through a very good source, not money being stolen. Not money being stolen when I invest.
Thank you.
The second one is, I want to know from you, will this be extended, what the job you are doing now, will it be extended beyond 2015? Because we know that before 2019, when the Buhari regime took over, it was 2015. The corruption is as far back as 2015, isn't it?
Yes.
What I'm asking is, are they going to lower the period below that time of 2015?
Because we are all aware that before 2015, there were a lot of corruption in Nigeria.
No, there's corruption. So the moment there is incident of corruption, we go after you.
Okay.
No matter the time it's
Okay, thank you. Thanks.
Yeah, yes.
Well, thank you very much indeed to Dr. Bakri and his team for bringing this conference together today. It's only thanking your presentation, for thanking all those people who were here before you. I think it's been fantastic, it's been very, very stimulating. Corruption is not new.
Introduce yourself, sir.
What? Oh, sorry. My name is Jimmy Adefiroye. I'm a local councillor in London Borough of Lewisham. I've been civic mayor for my borough for 7 years.
And former mayor.
Yes.
Let's do that.
As a student in when the gentleman, the second speaker, they are talking about corruption of local authority. I mean, that I hope, he was not here now, but I hope he was not referring to the UK. Because, I mean, action of corruption in any local authority in this country is, I mean, you pay for it without hesitation whatsoever. Now, what I was saying earlier was that corruption is not new. When I was a school child in Nigeria, we have a station in school where we had some badges on lapel as of bribery scorners. That's over 6 decades ago. And we are still talking about the same situation nowadays. We cannot blame anybody for it, but the fact that it's still going on all this time, there's no point in going back to the damage done to development, damage is done to happiness, damage is done is family, and so on and so forth. Now, my question, very, very brief, question is, you know, most of the money, using money, is exported to Europe. Now, if we get aid from Europe,
particularly London,
if we do not spend it properly, we are exposed. So what are we doing to expose those European countries who are reluctant to release the stolen money back to Nigeria? And also, what are we doing about those people who facilitated it? Because most of the money coming from developing countries is being scheduled through professional accountants from Europe. So you are fighting at home. Please, how will you strengthen fighting abroad?
Yes, please let me answer this one. It's very important. Yes. We collaborate with other law enforcement agencies with other countries to do what we are doing. And these are the areas the Nigerians in diaspora will have to key in. Because without information, there's nothing you can do. If the Nigerians in diaspora can expose them, because you know them, you don't have to appreciate them, you don't have to celebrate them, you know them all over the place. So you who live here or other part of the world outside Nigeria, you need to collaborate with us. You need to synergize with us so that give us the information. If there is information, credible information, we will go after anybody in the whole world. So I think this is the area we need your assistance, we need your collaboration.
Sorry, John, and then we'll come back.
Thank you. I'm John Taylor from Queen Mary University of London, from the law school, and I had just a very simple question. Do you, within Nigeria, with all the other good things that you're doing, do you have a law relating to unexplained wealth?
Yes.
Yes.
Similar to, and how do you implement it?
Exactly. Just last week, there was the judgment delivered by the Supreme Court of Nigeria that if you have an unexplained wealth, if you have something that you cannot explain, then the burden to prove has now shifted to the accused. So, if you have something that you cannot be justified by your own known income, the burden to prove otherwise is working. It has worked. It has gone up to the Supreme Court, and just last week, I don't know whether you are paying attention. Just last week, there was a Supreme Court judgment. So we are working. We are also partnering with our colleague in the NCA to see how we can be brought on board in our country.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah.
It's very important. I absolutely agree with the principle of unexplained West order.
My name is Professor Kemen. I'm a professor of criminology, and I'm also working in judicial capacity. When we talk about solutions, there's obviously the issue of judicial responsibility in Nigeria and here. And when money moves over to this place, the burden of proof and the process changes. You're aware of that. And you now called on diasporans to take action. That is doable, but you have to back it up, because the whole thing is evidence-based. You see what they write on group WhatsApp. They can just call somebody up and say they're so fake news is everywhere. The only way diasporans can do this, is to set up a strong advocacy organization that can take legal action on your behalf. But it has to be based on you supplying credible evidence that can stand the test in court. The whole business about fake news going around, we cannot do anything with it.
You know, the whistleblower policy applies to everybody, both Nigerians and non-Nigerians. So if you are able to give us, if you are able to blow a whistle, appropriate whistle here, we are able to work on it and get it done. I mean, you also get your 5%. And we have a whistleblower protection unit that protects everybody. You understand? So the collaboration is working. If you are here, give us information, we'll work on it. We recover something, 5% will go to you. I'm sorry, and this is not what you are saying. I just want to, these are the areas we can collaborate. There are certain things you cannot do as an individual, but if you can give us the information, we will act on it. We have a very good relationship with the law enforcement agencies in UK and in other places. You can also help us to put pressure on the UK authorities to repatriate the loot, you know, and then to extradite the looters to enable us to take judicial action.
Thank you very much. Two things, basic. Firstly, thank you for coming. The other thing I want to make you aware of, I was with the Crown Prosecution Service for many years. Brilliant Nigerian colleagues, lawyers, prosecuting great crimes. They would want to work in Nigeria, we have to make it conducive. They're there, they have the experience, and they won't make some of the mistakes. Secondly, I've been in Nigeria for a month. I just returned. There's an issue with regards to, first and foremost, there's an issue of trust. I encountered traveling through Nigeria via highest crossings, just for the experience. We have a situation where officers in uniform on certain roads, very few yards, are out there collecting bribes, stopping highest drivers, collecting money from them. It affects the public, because you see normal people, farmers, people getting their food to the market, and they're seeing this, people in uniform denigrating the office of the police, the uniform of the police. And we're talking about that respect. How are we going to, normal people, the poor, going to have the confidence on the police force and institutions of the state? What you're doing is at the top end, you're doing a brilliant job at the top end, but we need to convince the very poor. And when I was talking to the very poor, they're saying, look, we're used to it, this is the norm, there's nothing we can do about it. So they've lost confidence. So I need it to be forefront of the bottom, and I think the masses need to see offices of the state being respected. And if you can do that.
You have only seen the one with the policemen on the road. You need to go to the hospital. Go to the airports. Hospital. So that's why I say the best strategy in fighting corruption is to mobilize everybody, let everybody take ownership of the fight against corruption. We need you. Please, when you come and see me. Yes. You have to collaborate together.
Thank you for the work you are doing, I think my question is a slight extension to the gentleman that spoke. You're doing brilliant. I've seen the video. I never thought it's as big as this. And I've always thought it's at high level. And as a step to what that gentleman has said, government institutions, we know where they are, the passport office, the police station where people have to pay for bills when bill is free. We know at the airport where people give receipts for taking foodstuffs out of the country that they doesn't get into the government money. How are you filtering that? And what effort are you making to get this fight to state government level? All this talk about corruption is only at federal level. The IPPS you have implemented has not been taken on by any state. The BVN and the TSA, no state government is buying into those proposals. How do we want to fight the corruption if there is 36 against President Muhammad Buhari, which we are against this fight?
Sorry, yeah. Okay. Yeah, mine is a quick question, and I will see why we stand up a little bit. I've just returned from Nigeria. I've got a little petition which I'm handing over to you. I sent money to Nigeria, 150,000 naira. My sister phoned me, I've got 150,000 naira, thank you, and within 10 minutes the money was withdrawn. I've been battling this since June, and anywhere I go, when I went to Nigeria because of it, how much is 150,000? And I think it's not too small for me. Please, this is my petition. I went to the Lagos.
Where is your sister?
Where does she live? You don't know. Yeah, I went to Lagos State Police Command, and the day they were asking for money, they sent my letter, and I asked them, can you give me an email if I'm back to London?
Did you send the money to an account?
I sent it to an account, GT Bank. All the details are there. The BVN of the man who stole the money is there. And this man must have stolen more money since June. He should be arrested. My details is there, please. Thank you.
Go back and check it.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, my dear. Sorry, Ibrahim. Please, let's listen to them. This is very interesting.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Bola Mukarti. I am a PhD candidate at the School of Oriental and African Studies here. And Mr. Chairman, you spoke about collaboration, and being corruption hunters. Mr. Chairman, I have been one, and I haven't found the experience, well, I mean, good with EFCC. In 2015, I wrote a petition, forwarded a petition on behalf of Kano State pensioners against Dr. Governor Rabiu Musa Konkaso, former governor, alleging non-remittance of 10 billion naira into their account, and provided evidence of misappropriation of their properties in Abuja to your office. The matter was taken to the court by Konkoso, seeking to enforce his fundamental right because he heard that EFCC was going to arrest him. EFCC officials in Kano made affidavit on oath saying there is prima facie case in the petition I sent and that they were going to investigate it. Konkoso instituted another action at Kano State High Court alleging defamation, and his case was dismissed, and I personally conducted the case. But until today, EFCC has never invited me or my clients to hear from us, and then to cap it all, EFCC zonal head of operations in Kano told the media in October of 2016 that they have never received any petition from anyone against Konkoso and that they are not going to investigate him. Mr. Chairman, fighting corruption is about perception, and that's why Transparency International measures corruption perception index. And these kinds of acts, because Konkoso was in ABC, tells the world and others in Nigeria that the fight against corruption is only directed against opposition. Mr. Chairman, let me make my point, let me conclude my point here, that there has recently been 14 videos going around of Kano State Governor allegedly collecting bribe of $5 million. Allegedly. Ganduje. Mr. Chairman, was reported yesterday by Premium Times, I don't know whether that information is correct, that you said you cannot investigate him for 2 reasons. One, he is a sitting governor, and 2, it is subsidized. Mr. Chairman, you investigated Payoshe while he was a governor. Yeah. Secondly, there is a decision of the Supreme Court, Firehead against Inspector General of Police, reported in 2002 in Volume 7 of the Nigerian Weekly Law Report, in which the Supreme Court said a sitting governor can be investigated. The only thing you cannot do is you cannot arrest him, and you cannot take him to the court.
One of the reasons.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman.
No. One of the reasons here.
Sorry.
I am working on it here. Don't personalize it. Okay. I'm working on it here. Okay. Here, one of the consultations was on the forensic analysis of whatever is contained in the video. I don't have to investigate on the pages of newspapers.
Yes. Can I correct this?
Yes.
Excuse me. How authentic is that video?
And that's the point I have.
Mr. Chairman, if you can have just sit down and ask.
Don't worry. It's replying.
Okay, if you have a copy of the petition you mentioned about the pension, you bring it up. We investigate anybody who is indicted, who is found to have committed an offense or a crime. If you don't have are you in APC or PDP, whichever, have you been invited? Because you have not committed any offense. So if you have not committed an offense, we will not invite you. The 2 governors I just referred to as convicts that have been convicted, they are in APC. Jolly Nyame is APC. Darie is APC. They are the members of the ruling party. So it is not true for anybody to insinuate, to suggest that we go up only after non-APC members. I don't think it's right. We go after people who have committed offenses, who have case to answer. Period.
Sorry. Yeah.
I said I haven't concluded.
I said, give me the petition.
I am so sorry, Mr. Chairman. I will give you the petition in respect of Concoso.
Yes.
I will forward that petition to your office if I can get an email.
No, you said not give us now. Or we'll give you
Mr. Chairman, I was in Nigeria when I wrote the petition, and the original copy of the petition is in my office in Nigeria.
I will assume it. I will find out what actually happened.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, is your commitment that you are going to investigate Ganduje's allegations and tell us if the videos are correct? I mean, if they are genuine, they still would be prosecuted after he leaves office. Is that your commitment, Mr. Chairman?
We investigate and prosecute any person who is found to be wanted.
That's all right.
And we have to conduct forensic investigation.
Okay, go on, sir. Go on, sir. Go on, sir.
First of all, thank you. First of all, taking it my interest is in the future of EFCC. My question is, how are you free? How are you free to strengthen the EFCC? That is what powers, what freedom have you got to make? Because when you are talking about corruption, one reason the corruption is the way it is the weakness of institutions in the country. Now, if you are to fight corruption, I will expect them to give you some powers to strengthen EFCC. For example, if they say 10% of your recovery should be spent on strengthening EFCC, strengthening the organization, staffing, equipment, and your relationship with other external organizations. Those are the things. How free are you to really do the work? Doing the work is making the organization strong. Thank you.
Sorry, we take one more question.
Please, hands on,
please. Can you use last? Please, we'll take one more question. We'll go for tea break. The chairman is going to decorate some people here as anti-corruption ambassador. and everyone will have an opportunity for that when we come back, and we'll continue on this question and answer after the tea break. The chairman is here for us, so he's not win.
Yeah.
Mine is more of an observation and watching the videos out. I work in the home office. I prefer the cases before that was dealt with, which is fine. But when it comes to presenting evidence, you can sit here and you can try and chase people forever. But if you do not have good chain of evidence in terms of collating everything together to present to the court, then you will lose when you go to the court. Watching the video, I mean, I saw people handling evidence with their money. I saw various people handling evidence. There was no control of securing where the evidence were. So these are the things. I didn't see anybody taking notes. What I mean, as a law enforcement, I'm the immediate past president of British Nigerian Law Enforcement Officers. When you are in an environment like that, I did not see anybody with notes, taking notes in terms of every officer there collaborating their story. So when you go to court, these are some of the things that would make you
those aspects concluded. This is the documentary. It's after.
No, but even that, because you showed us where they were going into buildings, where they were opening the things.
No, that wasn't actual.
For the video.
That was later.
Oh, so this was just for this is for show. Okay, I'm hoping that that is okay.
So let's go for tea now.
The chairman is not here. We'll take more questions. So we need to have a break, and we are going to have people that bring evidence
Thank you. So we can take tea now and come back. No problem. Sorry.